Welcome everybody to our next session, which is for accessibility. I'm going to introduce you to the wonderful Harriet. Harriet is an accessibility consultant and also producer at Manycat Studio. She is absolutely fantastic. She's got a wonderful slideshow for us today. What I'm going to ask you to do is, if you've got any questions, please pop them in the questions channel. Just type them away and leave them there, and we'll answer them at the end of the session. And if there is anything that you need in the meantime, please ping me. So I can help you out. I'm just going to let Harriet take it away and let you introduce yourself. I'm going to mute myself and disappear off camera. Okay. All right.
Okay. So, hello everybody. I'm feeling very energized today. It's not necessarily a good thing. It's the ADHDs driving the vehicle. So welcome to this talk. Accessibility is for everyone. It means both kinds of accessibility is for everyone. If you think it has an alternate meaning, it's got that meaning too. And accessibility is absolutely easier than you think it is. So, about me, like Anina said, I'm a producer, a project leader and accessibility consultant at Manycat Studios. I've been doing project lead stuff at Manycat for about 7 months now, but I've been an accessibility consultant for about 5 years. I've worked with first-party AAA studios, AA, indie, solo devs on accessibility and disability inclusion as well. I've worked with UK national charities like Scope. I was in an advert, it was great. I am an allegedly, no, definitely human, a disabled person myself, and the literal physical manifestation of big sister energy. That means I care very deeply, but I will give you back at the end of the day. So I come with DLC. Bear with me a sec. Let me just move some windows out of the way there. The ADHD is getting very distracted and it's not working. So yeah, I come with DLC, a recipe for success. I'm dyspraxic. I have ADHD, fibromyalgia, non-epileptic attack disorder, which is what I like to call surprise mode, and I'm autistic as well. There's a lot of things going on. I like to think of it as some sort of like, it's basically because the world would not be able to cope if I was fully able and capable in every single way, shape and form. It wouldn't be great for everybody else if I was fully able-bodied, because I can't think of any other reason why I would be gifted with so many different things. So yeah, they all affect me in a variety of lovely ways, and they work together to try and prevent me from living my life to its fullest. They all affect me neurologically, meaning my brain don't work so good now all the time. I struggle with comprehension and cognitive things. It's really difficult to learn new things, but it also affects my vision, because I get migraines and I'm sensitive to like high contrast stuff. I get motion induced seizures, which is fun. Migraines, also fun. With the fibromyalgia, I also have physical disability. Again, so much fun. So yeah, there's a lot going on. So yeah, I forgot I put those there. So yeah, I got added DLC. Really, it's for your own good, because yeah. So today, I'm going to have a little chat with you about disability and why accessibility is needed. I'm going to talk about why accessibility is really for everyone. Some little tips and things about art, because I know you guys have a lot of art focus, so I thought I'd put some stuff in there for you. And then we can do some Q&A at the end. So we're going to start with a big thing. We're going to start with 1 in 6, or 16% of the world, is estimated to be living with at least one disability, which currently is 1.3 billion people. And that's a lot of people. It's also 1 in 5 people in the UK and 1 in 6 people in the United States. And since July last year, it's gone up by about 90 million people for some mysterious global pandemic-y reason. It's gone up by a whole percent of the world. In the UK, 7% of the UK games industry, according to the UK census, identify as having a substantially difficult disability, with 4% considering themselves disabled and 2% using aids or adaptations. So there's a little bit of a challenge there in that 16% of the world is estimated to be disabled, but only 4% of the UK games industry consider themselves disabled. So that's why I am big, I am visible, I talk a lot, because that way people can know they can be disabled and work in the industry. Here's some money stuff because, oh, that's all the wrong way around. The total estimated spend and power of families in the UK with at least one person in the family unit with disabilities is £274 billion a year. That's a lot of money that if a game is not accessible, that money's not getting spent on the game. There's myths about disabled people that we don't have jobs, we don't spend money, and so it's not worth investing any time into attracting that money. But it's worth it because that's a lot of money. So what's disability? It's not a dirty word. You can say disability, you can say disabled person, that's absolutely fine, because it's a description, it's not an insult, and it refers to the characteristic of a group of people. An individual is a disabled person. The alternatives that non-disabled people are like to make up because they feel really uncomfortable with the word disability are in fact more offensive. I am not differently abled. I am completely able when accessibility is in the mix to do the same things as everybody else. I am not handy capable. I am neither handy or capable. So yeah, not a dirty word, we can use it. Also, it's not an exclusive club like all the other protected characteristics. You can join the disability club anytime. Literally at any moment you could become disabled, whether that's permanently or temporarily. If you say sprain your ankle, you are temporarily disabled. If you break your ankle temporarily, if you lose your leg in a horrible accident, now you're permanently disabled. It's a club for everybody. So that's why it's important to think about it from a personal perspective. I find that some people do struggle with the idea of, well, why do I have to change things to suit the disabled people? Well, one day you're going to be one. If it's not by injury, because of old age, because we are all getting older. A lot of gamers are over 60 now, and those are the gamers that built the games industry. My mum was part of that. I don't know if any of the programmer types, if there are any, know about a person called Mike Singleton who made ZX Spectrum games for the Sinclair. He was my mother's English teacher or something. So yeah, my mum's knocking 60, I think, nearly. She'll kill me if she sees this. So yeah, gamers are getting older, and it's not always apparent. So it was that we used to use the word invisible disability, but the problem with that is it makes it seem like someone is hiding their disability. So I tend to use non-apparent or apparent disability rather than visible or non-visible. Because depending on what my brain state is in, it's very visible that I'm autistic, but not necessarily always visible that I'm physically disabled. So we can't make any assumptions. Neurodiversity. Oh, this is anyone who works with me will know this is my hill. Neurodiversity is a collective noun rather than an individual noun. It refers to a group of people with a varying amount of neurotypes, meaning that of the normal neurotype, typical neurotype, and that of the divergent neurotype. Neurodivergent meaning someone who diverges from what is expected on a neurological level in terms of it affecting how someone thinks and perceives and comprehends information that is given to them from the wider world and society. And a neurotypical person is somebody who are cognitively and intellectually developed as would be typically expected. Conditions that are considered to be neurodivergent are things like autism, ADHD, Tourette's, dyslexia, dyspraxia, dyscalculia, dysgraphia, got to get the 4 of them in. Mears-Erlin, if anyone's got visual stress, it's classed as a neurodivergent condition. Hyperlexia, synesthesia, and some mental health conditions such as schizophrenia, OCD, borderline, bipolar, dissociative identity disorder, antisocial personality disorder. They can also be classed as neurodivergent too, because those conditions affect the way that person perceives and interacts with the world. People can have more than one atypical neurotype. The official term is multiply neurodivergent. I prefer neurospicy. Oh, wait. So what's game accessibility then? It is the process of removing or mitigating the barriers in place that have a fundamental negative impact on a player's gaming experience. And there's, I don't know why that slide is definitely in the wrong place. There are a few ways that we can approach games design when it comes to accessibility. The traditional way of approaching how we solve problems regarding disability is the medical model, and every single person who is openly disabled will tell you how much they hate it, because it was developed by the medical and charity sectors, and treats disability as a medical problem that needs to be prevented, cured, or contained safely. This model assumes that the disabled person is unable to have a full and complete life because of their disability. Specifically, it's the disability. In the medical model, they see the disability as the problem, or even in some cases, the person. And that's why there's a lot of charities that will have Sarah McLachlan in the background as we just pan slowly in black and white to a child in a wheelchair. Because how could that, the medical model says that, how could that child possibly have a happy life? They're disabled. But then disabled people were like, actually, we don't like that. We're capable of anything else. It's the rules, the world that is wrong. It's the inherent barriers of an inaccessible world that creates disability. And when those barriers to access of the wider world are removed, the person with impairments is able to have a full and complete life. That is why we have fun legal requirements like reasonable accommodations, because when we make accessibility considerations for people, they can do exactly the same as anybody else. There are 2 types of barriers. Attitude is one. That is how people perceive and treat disabled people. Oh, like you don't look disabled to me, you must be faking it. You could have, I've had people say that to me because I like to dress nice, so I can't be autistic. I like to wear makeup, can't be autistic. I'm well spoken and able to deal with things socially, so I must not be autistic. That's not how it works. And that kind of attitude does give people this attitude of, well, if you don't meet my criteria for what I think is a disabled person, well, why should I help you? Why should I make these accessibility considerations? Things like, they should get a job. I'm not paying taxes to fund their lifestyle. As FYI, in the UK, disability benefits are not a lot of money at all. And the people who say this kind of thing also will simultaneously be absolutely disgusted when a disabled person does get a job, because how dare they be in the workplace? It's weird. Oh, it's such a hassle to make these reasonable adjustments. They're making a big deal for no reason. I used to get in that in retail when I worked in retail, because I needed flexibility on the rota, and I needed to at least know what the rota would be a couple of weeks in advance. And I'd have things like, well, we can't just make these sort of arrangements for everybody, you know, we've got to make it fair. That's not what reasonable adjustments are. It's not equality, it's equity. It helps people be equal to others by lifting them up just a little bit more. Disabled people ruin my disabled people playing games ruins my experience. They shouldn't be playing the games I like. Oh, you know, the whole difficulty versus, easy mode sort of argument. Well, if you make an easy mode, if you add trigger warnings in the game I like, that's wrong. I don't like that. That attitude, it's a barrier. And excuse me, could you go outside? You're disturbing the customers. Had that once. I was not feeling great, thought I was going to have a seizure, and I was asked to leave the building because they didn't want me to have a seizure in the building. Again, the attitude was that it was an inconvenience. The other types of barriers are tangible ones. Building with no lift, only stairs. So for someone in a wheelchair, if there's no lift, they can't use the stairs. It creates a disability. It creates that barrier to access. No text-to-speech on main menus in games. So people who have no sight whatsoever will have no way of knowing which options they're pressing, what those options say, anything like that. That's why a lot of games turn that on and have the option to turn that on before you even get to the main menu. We're not insured to have you in here with crutches, so people refusing people access or not being able to, access buildings, physically being unable to get in. I've had seizures because there was no appropriate warning for strobing. There was one for epilepsy, but they didn't warn me that it was strobing. I'm looking at you, Eurovision. A lot of strobing in that. You'll have to stand. We don't have a waiting room. A physical, tangible barrier. So, but tangible ones are both in the real world and digitally, 2 barriers. There are a couple of things coming in legal-wise in the next couple of years that are going to be interesting to watch how that's getting implemented, such as the European Accessibility Act and the American Communications and Voice Accessibility Act, I think comes in next year or the year after. So those are going to make some improvements, but we shall see. So how do we translate those barriers and be like, okay, how do we mitigate, how do we remove those barriers? So I teach folks, I'm a big sort of Microsoft inclusive design stan. Well, absolutely, it's amazing. Some places call it universal design, and it's slightly different, but it's basically the same. And it's basically designing something to be as functional as possible for as many people as possible. You'll notice it doesn't say disabilities. It operates under the understanding that every single design decision that we make has the potential to either include or exclude the player. And the impact of that is when we exclude people by designing specifically for the dark blue dots here on the screen that are surrounded by the circle, let's say we made a game and we've only designed it around one kind of person. All the ones on the outside, they can't access that software, that service. Then you've got separation, which is, well, they can have their own games. If they have their own games, they can play those. But then you've got 2 separate things. You've got 2 separate groups that never intermingle, never understand each other. You've got integration. So that is like, well, we'll bring in some disabled people to talk about the design features, but we won't actually have them talk to the designers at all. And we'll bring them in at the very last minute so that there's no integration throughout the whole production of the game at all. Again, that one doesn't work. There we go. And then we've got inclusion, where everybody's mixed together, feeding back. Whenever I've consulted with studios that do this sort of way of designing and looking at games, they're the ones that are doing it early. They're including disabled people who are consultants. They're getting opinions, they're getting information, and they're facilitating conversations cross-discipline so that everybody on the team is thinking in an accessible way from day 0. I know, take a deep breath. I know it's a lot of information. So the way I think about accessibility design isn't about, oh, let's make loads of options so they can be turned on and off, right? The way I think about it is from point 0, when we're concepting a game, when you're thinking about what's this game going to be, is going through, even from even a narrative, from your story beats, thinking about how this game is going to be at every stage in an accessible way. So when I say using lenses, it's just looking at it from lots of different perspectives. Now, initially, people, when they're thinking of accessibility and disability, they will be, oh yeah, person in a wheelchair, person with physical disabilities, because that is usually most people's experience with disability in their life, is seeing someone in a wheelchair or maybe with crutches or something like that. Oh, we'll do a little flash. Before I go on to the other bits, one of the common misnomers is that a wheelchair is the marker of being disabled. And I challenge people to think of a wheelchair much more like a pair of glasses. Much as you wouldn't tell someone who is wearing glasses that they're disabled because they have glasses, that those glasses are the thing that makes them blind, the wheelchair is not the thing that makes a person struggle with walking. Not everyone in a wheelchair is completely unable to walk. Many wheelchair users are what they call ambulatory wheelchair users, which means they're able to move around at short distances and need the wheelchair for either fatigue or pain and things like that. So this picture highlights how the wheelchair for this gentleman has not made him disabled. He has been able to move around and get to this point in the world, but has now encountered stairs. And because he's encountered those stairs, now he has been disabled. And that's a picture that sort of proves that the point about the social model, that before then he was going about his business, living his life. And then when he reaches the stairs and there's no lift access, now he's disabled. So there's 5 kinds of disability sort of categories, and some of the challenges involved with those categories overlap with each other. First one is visual. So you're looking at things like being completely without vision, so being blind. You've got people with low vision, so they may have very limited vision, but not completely blind. They also use the term blind as well to refer to themselves. Some blind people refer to themselves as being without sight because it helps ensure there's no confusion. Visual also includes like color blindness. There's a fair few different kinds of color blindness out there. It disproportionately affects men more than it does women. So keep an eye on that. We've got neurological/cognitive. So those can be things like your neurodivergent conditions. It can be things like having seizure disorders, mental health, different ways that your brain interacts with the world, and when coming up with a barrier, struggles to connect with the world the same way as others. You've got audio, so that includes being deaf from birth, having no hearing at all, having limited hearing, people who have cochlear implants or hearing aids, people like myself who are hard of hearing through neurological means. For example, I can't hear at all when there's a crowd or certain noises. It sort of like cancels out anything I'm hearing. And I also struggle with the cognitive to actually process anything that goes in my ears without a lot of concentration. We've also got, obviously, the physical. Physical is divided into 2 categories, unless they're adding an extra one. That is large motor and small motor. Large motor being movement of the limbs and the body itself. So some of my disability physically is that my legs don't do what they're supposed to, and my kneecap likes to dislocate a lot. So that's large motor. That affects my ability to stand. But I also have small motor disability, small motor being your hands, feet, the smaller parts of your body. So that affects, for example, my ability to grip a controller for long periods of time. And the last one is communication. And this is something that a lot of people, I find, it's one of those things when people realize that communication can be a disability, category, that they go, oh yeah, being able to talk. There are many people who are nonverbal, whether that's temporarily or completely. There's people who you can't tell because I'm deliberately not relaxing my voice, but I can be quite scouse sometimes from the old northwest England, and that in itself can be a communication barrier because people from other countries don't understand me. People from my own country don't understand me. Things like having a stroke can affect your ability to form words properly and communicate as well. You've also got, with people who are deaf, a lot of them have sign language of their respective country as their first language. Spoken English is often a second language for many people who are deaf, and so being able to communicate, they have a deaf accent, and so that can be a communication disability too. But wait, there's more. So when we think about, we've got your disability, but then we have other things that when we encounter a barrier, they become disabling conditions. I'll be honest, I can't remember what I put the eyes in for. I haven't got a clue. Children, you can say, well, I'm not making a game for kids. I can tell you right now, Five Nights at Freddy's would not be doing so well if toddlers weren't playing it. So thinking about simple, having someone who's got a kid with them on the sofa, say they're looking after the kids because they work from home and the kid's off school sick and they've got to hold the child and they want to play games and the kid's asleep, so they've only got one arm available. Their access needs are the same as somebody who has a limb difference. Who else we've got? This gentleman, the man of advancing age. Like I mentioned before, gamers are getting old, really old, and so making games that they can't play seems really bizarre, and I'll be honest, quite a bit disrespectful, if I'm honest, because without those gamers, we wouldn't have games at all. So being advanced in age is a major factor. Pregnant people. Pregnancy itself isn't necessarily a disabling condition, except for the fact that you have a 6 to 10 pound living thing inside you, and you'll need to sit down a lot more, and you'll be a little bit more exhausted, and your brain is cognitively in a deficit because all of your energy is spent growing a human. Medication. Some medications make you drowsy, some medications make you climb the walls, some medication makes you loopy. Medication itself can help some conditions but make others worse. For example, my heavy painkillers turn me into, I can see through time. So it's not always great to play games that have a lot of complexity because I won't know what's going on. You've also got your environmental factors. Is a person at home where their environment is controlled? Are they at their computer? Are they sat in bed on their Switch? Are they sat on the sofa with the TV like 4 meters away? Where are they? That affects how you design a game. For example, if your subtitles are tiny and you're playing it on a sofa and the TV's on the other side of the room, there's no way you're going to be able to read what's going on. Are they on public transport? I am going to sound like a really grumpy old lady, but kids today don't use headphones, and then they're playing video. What if somebody is getting mad at a youth on the public transport saying, you need to turn that down, but they want to finish a level? How are they going to finish a level if all of the prompts are audio only? The same accessibility consideration for them benefits deaf people and people who are hard of hearing. Are you in a crowded room? If I'm playing games at a family gathering, maybe we're all playing games together, maybe Jackbox or Gartic Phone or something, there are certain overwhelming elements that may come into play when you've got multiple people, like multiple audio prompts. Whose phone's going off? We don't know. It's all got the same sound. You've also got added things of distractions. Trigger warnings can be helpful for adults with children in the room, in terms of like trigger prompt content warnings, and be like, right, there's something really horrible coming up. We're just warning you so you can cart the kids out of the room and see the gnarly ultra violence on your own. Is it really sunny? I'm lucky to face a window so I don't get glare on my screen. But if I'm sat over on my bed, I do get sunlight right in my eyes. It affects my ability to play. If I'm outside and things like that, we've got an outside. If you're playing on your Switch or Steam Deck outside, you're going to get awful glare. And it's going to affect people, you know, contrast and the way the visuals look play a really important part in the environment. And then temperature. So for me, when it gets cold, my arms don't move so good anymore. My joints go, nope, that's it, we're freezing up for the winter, and I can't move my hands very well. In the summer, I'm like a spring chicken. I gather all my energy like a solar panel. But temperature can have an effect on somebody's cognitive ability. It can also have, and that's just for anybody, regardless of whether they have a disability. I don't know if you've ever tried to think a thought when it's really hot. It's not possible. That's just a pop-up of the Microsoft Inclusive Design Toolkit. It's a PDF and it's got little things on it, little icons to sort of help you see the difference between the permanent, the temporary, and the situational kinds of disabilities that you can have. So some art-related thingies. So, because I know MLC, you have artists, and a lot of accessibility stuff doesn't focus on art, but you're in luck because that was what I did in my undergrad. So colour considerations. Having good contrast. It helps with colour blindness, visual impairments, cognitive accessibility. This presentation was extremely bright previously, but I knocked it down a little bit in terms of the colours because it was hurting me on a physical and emotional level. And using patterns to differentiate colours that might be similar for someone who's colourblind. I've got this little thing here, this little reference chart. It sort of gives you an example of what colours change to when somebody has a colourblind condition. The most common being deuteranopia, which is where things are ranging between blue and yellow. For VFX and animation, movement speed and motion blur is bad times for the brain gang. I have to turn motion blur off because it will make me throw up. And depending on how the movement speed visually is related to how it is when it's controlled, bad times. Strobing effects, I did test them on a personal level, but they're not good. If someone has epilepsy, which I technically still do, that's fun. Epilepsy is fun in that each seizure you have could be the one that kills you. So it's really important not to have things that cause seizures, because if someone has a seizure, it could literally kill them. Fun facts about epilepsy. You have to laugh about it, otherwise you'd spend your life living in terror. So high contrast patterns and fast motion, for me, that can cause quite a lot of nausea and a feeling like I'm going to have a seizure. I don't tend to, but it can make me feel like I'm about to, which then tricks my other seizure condition into joining the fray instead. That one won't kill me. Parallaxes, if they're not at a smooth sort of passover, that can cause motion sickness as well. And bright flashes and things can trigger seizures as well. So making sure with VFX that you're checking the contrast of the VFX versus the environment itself as well is helpful. And some text considerations. Sans serif fonts are easy to read for most people with a neurodivergent condition. This one, I'll be honest, I'm using Albert Sans. It's not ideal because the capital letter I and the lowercase l are very similar. Ideally, you want similar glyphs to be very different from each other so they're readable. And also, yeah, subtitles should have the ability to use an opaque background and be large enough or scalable enough that you can be seen on a TV from at least 2 meters away. So at what stage do we do this? Well, you can do it from day one. Concept stage. Talk with accessibility professionals. They can teach you more in depth how to look at things. You can give them, hey, is this accessible? And they can be like, not really. Or you can say, is this accessible? And they'll go, not for me, but it might be for other people, because one of the hard lessons about accessibility is you can do your best, and your best is absolutely good enough, because it's not possible to make a perfectly accessible game as far as I know. One day maybe, but at the minute with where technology is, it's not. So creating your game concept using inclusive design lenses, looking at your even from like the visual concepts and your sort of promotional imagery and your in-house imagery to sort of proof of concept, what it's going to look like, levels and things. Is that level designed with cognitive people in mind? Is it something that you find easy because you designed it? Can a toddler get through it? Things like that, where you're looking through at different people's different lenses and looking at it from all those different perspectives. Plan for and consult on authentic disability representation. So I'm not saying shoehorn a disabled person in the game or anything, but, you know, if the opportunity comes up, get some disabled people in with that disability to make sure it's real. Because there's surprisingly a fair amount of disabled characters in games, but they're not very well authentic. And yeah, I'm looking at you, quiet man. Talk to your team members with disabilities. You remember the statistics above? 1 in 6 people globally, 1 in 5 in the UK, 1 in 6 in the US. If you're in a room with 7 people, there's at least one of you that has a disability, statistically. So talk to each other, talk to your team members about the things they struggle with. They may not have like a diagnosis or anything like that, but lots of people find little ways to make their own lives a little bit more accessible, to create their own accommodations to make the playing field level, whether that's everybody seems to use subtitles now because sound designers in film they've just lost it and they hate us all, because I can't think of any other reason. Things like that. Everyone has little things they do to make life a bit easier. They might well be accessibility things. In pre-production, whenever you're designing or prototyping features, say you've gotten past your concept stage and you want to get your accessibility in at this stage instead, you could still do this as well as the concept. There's no reason not to be checking accessibility consistently throughout the game dev pipeline, but prototype your features, test them out against accessibility considerations. Did this work with this? No, what can we do to change that? Research accessibility elements. That's when you get in like, okay, what's been done before? How did they do it? Can we get that in our game? Formulating an internal accessibility framework. I recommend this to every studio I talk to. Get yourself your own internal framework, because it will set your entire studio up in a robust way to be thinking about accessibility from the moment you hire somebody, and it's part of their onboarding and it's part of the studio sort of culture. And when you've got that framework for design as well, it becomes natural. It becomes as part of any other design vocabulary. And plan for accessibility sprint reviews or other sort of gates to assess accessibility progress. Now, you might want to sort of go define it to yourself. What kind of accessibility would you like to implement? How much of it would you like to just do as much as you possibly can, or push or research and see if you can do something no one else has done before? Make sure that you are giving yourself checkpoints to be able to look back and see if you're meeting those sort of gates and reviews. During production, iterate on those features, in particular your accessibility features, because as anyone knows in game dev, just because you think it's done doesn't mean it's done. It's done when the producer says it is. QA test, start QA testing your features, get your team testing builds earlier than production ideally, but I'm separating into things that if you were starting your accessibility work during production phase, this is specifically what you do, but ideally you'd start at concept. Lots of play testing with disability specific play tests. You want to do play testing with as many different kinds of people who aren't necessarily QA testers as well. You want authentic, real people's feedback on it. And post-release. Oh, you didn't think the accessibility stops when you get to release the game, did you? Nope. Respond to your player feedback. You may well get disabled players going, I'd really wanted to play this game, but I couldn't because this thing. Take it on board, see if you can implement it. What was it? The Outer Worlds did that, because their font was basically, I would be sat 30 centimeters away from my screen and still need a magnifying glass to read the text. They fixed it. It was a lot easier than they thought it was. Patches and bug fixing, and being vocal about them, especially when it's an accessibility fix. Make sure that your patch notes are accessible, easy to read, easy to access. Have your accessibility features listed on a website somewhere, even if it's just a thread on Twitter. Having your accessibility features guarantees that there are going to be people with disabilities that read that, and instead of deciding against purchasing the game you made, they're going to make the decision that that person paid attention and wants my money so they can have it. And finally, ensure all your PR and marketing is accessible. That includes alt text on all images, on social media, wherever possible. Some platforms are really bad about alt text. Making sure you have closed captions on any marketing videos and things like that. If possible, ASL or BSL interpreters, if you're talking to anybody, and things like that. It's at base level, closed captions on videos and alt text on images. And making sure that a screen reader can read all of your text things, and yeah. So I'm going to breeze through these last few bits. Have a think about this. This is a volume slider. And you're like, Harriet, why would I need to think about a volume slider? Well, if you have changed the volume on anything, in particular in games, you have used an accessibility feature. You have customized the game to meet your needs, which is what accessibility really is, about allowing somebody to customize their experience to allow them to enjoy the gameplay in the way that is intended. So I want to show you some games that are, some old games that are accessible. They weren't on purpose. And I'm going to show you some games that are accessible on purpose, but weren't accessible in other ways, to show that while there are games that are really good at it, there's still lots to go, and it's okay. Nobody gets it right. It's fine. It's good. It's good. Creatures 3, one of my favorite games. Long time ago now. It's the learning room. This was like AI before AI. Little creatures were basically self-contained AI that had all sorts of DNA and stuff. And I used to do horrific genetic experiments, and it's a good job I stopped, because I think I'd be on a list somewhere. The learning room teaches the little norns, the little creatures, how to talk. But you'll notice that it reads, you can see the word, you can see a picture that accompanies the word, and the machine itself speaks the word as well. So you have 3 different ways of conveying that one information that's accessible. We've got Deus Ex Invisible War, panned because it was a console port, but because it was a console port, it had subtitles and auto aim, and it allowed you to change your interface opacity and individual volume controls for the speech, the music, and the sound effects, difficulty options. This is accessible, but this is from 2003, before anybody cared about that, really. I mean, they did, but before games accessibility became the massive thing that it is now. Fallout 4. So we're starting to get with the Fallout 4 was never intended to necessarily be accessible as an intentional process. But the VAT system, extremely accessible when my hands weren't working and I could just aim for a head. It allowed me to play the game and progress through the story without being upset that I couldn't aim because my hand would not move into a position that would allow me to use a mouse and keyboard or a controller. So I'd use the controller and VATS would help me just get headshots and get brain confetti. It was great. So we're getting to the games. So Assassin's Creed Valhalla, there was a lot of accessibility design in this, but I can't play it. And I don't, on my monitor, it's okay, but on my laptop, it's not. On my laptop screen on this side. So depending on the accuracy of your screen, you'll see that the contrast on this is very bad. It's also got what I call the Ubisoft problem of even when the UI is minimal, there's too much of it going on. I just want to play the game. Let me play the game. There's so much UI. I get cognitively overloaded and then I get bored because I'm having to concentrate on stuff that's not the game in order to play the game. Even the gameplay for me as an ADHDer, having to do the Ubisoft game thing of run to a tower to unlock things, to talk to the same NPCs just in a different outfit for the same fetch quest, to gather the resources so I can do the main story. I have a job. I don't want to do it in video games unless it is pressure washer simulator. And God of War Ragnarok. So this one I popped in because this is an example of it did really well with accessibility stuff. This is the high contrast mode that allows people of low vision to be able to identify characters and discern them from the background. And yeah. I haven't played Ragnarok yet. I have played the previous one and some of the accessibility options that I had were really good. I did struggle with the combat because my little claw hands can't always attack at the right timing, but I managed to complete it eventually. And we're going to end on, this is Elden Ring, ironically, one of my most accessible games, and I know that's absolutely bananas to think about because of the whole discourse of like, it's difficult, oh my god. The way that Elden Ring is designed on a gameplay level, cognitively for me, is accessible. The UI, there's some symbols I don't know what the hell they mean to this day, and I don't think I ever will. My other half has tried to tell me what they mean, but I'm not listening. My brain's not going to accept that information at this point. The first mission and the tutorial, there are bits that are missed in terms of the UX, you know, like the tutorial area, but when you do the tutorial area, it is designed in such a way that it eases you in to the game bit by bit. Yes, you die quite quickly. It's a Souls-like, you know, it's a FromSoft game. But there are certain elements of the gameplay that were really, really accessible. So I put there it's a column A, column B situation. For many people, it's not accessible. Like, I have to pretend I can't see the UI. I make loads of mistakes all the time with the controls. I'm always summoning the horse thing instead of healing, or healing when I want to summon the horse. Or because I'm using the controller, I'm accidentally rolling or doing something I shouldn't be and ended up getting absolutely sent to another dimension by a big troll. But I'm able to play that, and I can't play FromSoft games. The other ones are the difficulty curve is much more of a difficulty cliff. So that's why that one's on there. So I'm just going to quickly go over some examples. I will send out the slides so you can look at these more individually. Questions to ask about design things. Does making this more accessible fundamentally change the game in a negative way? It's unlikely, but it's a question to ask. Like, if it doesn't make the game bad or change the game in a negative way, there's no reason not to make things more accessible. Will it cost more time, money, or energy to think about it later on? It costs more time, money, and energy to do accessibility when you're in the final stages of production than it does at concept stage. Have you already got features that are accessible by accident? as in things that weren't intended to be accessible, but when you look at them through the lenses of inclusive design, you go, actually, yeah, that is accessible. Have you already had this feature done? Has it been done accessibly by another studio or another game, or even another game in your own catalogue? Maybe it's already been done. You can draw from that other game and implement it that way. Can it be an optional feature? You might think this is for accessibility stuff. Not necessarily. Some things like a hard mode or a Iron Man mode or those kind of things, maybe, those could be the option rather than easy mode. Allow people who want the challenge to opt into the challenge rather than forcing, the psychological thing is those kinds of people will feel like they're being forced to opt out of hard mode if it's that you opt into easy and so on. Have we tested this feature before? If so, what did we find out that's relevant to accessibility? When analyze, research, keep notes, because it will help you in the long run. Have you spoken or consulted with disabled people and got their feedback? Because they know what it's like to be disabled and they can feedback what it's like. Who would be unable to access the game if we implement this feature as it is? Sometimes it helps to have literally a list of user types, user profiles of the kinds of people who won't be able to play your game if a feature is put in and it's not accessible. And who else will benefit from this accessibility consideration? So, subtitles, people who are deaf can benefit, but also people with cognitive disabilities can benefit. Parents with noisy kids can benefit. People in a crowded room can benefit. And remember, accessibility is for everyone, and that includes you. I've put up some resources just here. I don't know why that's gone back on. So yeah, that's.
Thank you very much. Brilliant. That was absolutely brilliant, and I've seen lots and lots of good feedback in the chat as well. They're all talking about things that they find difficult with accessibility. If you have any questions, guys, please pop them in the event questions channel so we can go through them, and we'll just go through them one at a time because we have a couple of minutes left at least. So we've actually got one from Mags very quickly at the top. She slipped in. So what are your thoughts about accessibility around the computing / GPU power used in games, specifically about who may not have access to the setups that many games are requiring from players?
A lot of my interest in the accessibility fair is the intersectionality with, I'm working class as all get out. I am from nothing. I grew up in poverty, like actual legitimate poverty. So it is a bit of a sore point for me that one of the reasons I can't play, even though I work in the industry, one of the reasons I can't play God of War Ragnarok is I lack the funds to purchase the hardware. Even though, I've worked with people that use things in that sort of console area and stuff like that, and I've worked with stuff like that, but I don't have one. I can't. I think that it is inherently, unfortunately, a part of the games industry being, by its nature, and I'm gonna sound like such a working class person. The games industry is inherently very middle class. It still is. It's getting better. It is getting better. But inherently it is quite middle class. A lot of opportunities are like, well, just go to develop. It's only a couple of grand, you'll be fine, as if people have got that kind of money running around. And it's the same with accessibility. When you look at things through lenses, look at it through the financial accessibility aspect as well. That's why a lot of indie games are doing a lot of amazing work. Celeste was incredible for that, in that they're implementing these accessibility features on a very limited budget, which is very helpful. I'm hoping that the affordability of hardware to access consoles and computers will come down in price as well.
Fingers crossed, right? It is getting insanely expensive now, particularly when there's been announcements that Nintendo are upping their prices for games as well, things like that. It's becoming more of a conscious thing, and a lot of people are starting to voice their opinions on it. So thank you very much, Mags, for that question. And we're going to move on to Rob, who is our lead animator. So a lot of focus went into making the software accessible, but do you think more focus should be also put into the hardware? I think this came at a very similar time as Max. Such as disability-focused controllers, like Sony's latest project.
Yes, in that I do think that there is a responsibility on manufacturers to. I know there's the Hori Flex, and 8BitDo has an accessible controller. The 8BitDo one is pretty affordable. I think it's less than 50 quid, which for any controller is like, wow. It is I think there is, I can't talk about things because some things I'm not allowed to talk about, but there may be some positive things about some things that I can't talk about in the future.
Well, we shall keep our eyes peeled. So we have a follow-up from that one as well. Your favorite game as far as accessibility goes, who has nailed it in your opinion? It's a hard one.
It is, because it's such an individualized sort of thing. Like a game that's really quite accessible for me and has been is Grounded. The UI is not too complicated and cognitive overload and stuff like that. So that one's been quite, in terms of recent times, that one's been quite good. And the Elden Ring co-op mod is actually my top accessibility thing, even though it's a mod, because I can get my other half to help me in Elden Ring now. But yeah, it's difficult. I mean, I play a lot of old games because I'm fascinated with the whole accidental accessibility thing. We look at it through this modern lens of, well, accessibility is new. 5 years ago, when I first started doing accessibility, you would have to draw blood from yourself and go up to the director and go, please, please, I'll do anything. Now, it's a very different attitude. But when I go back and I look at other games and I look at things like, for example, some Japanese RPGs, when they were translated to the West, they were subtitled and they had fun translations and things like that, and little things like that. So it's difficult for me. I play too many games.
It's definitely difficult to pinpoint it, and I think it is the same for me as well. I couldn't pinpoint one that's done it for me so far, purely because I'd have to sit and go through my list of games and figure out. They all have so many different features. So we have one last question in from Ben, and if anybody has any questions, can I ask you to pop them in there now if you can think of them, so we can start wrapping up. If not, don't worry, you can pop them in the Discord. I'm sure if Harriet's about, she will answer them at some point. I'll let her know if they're in there. I know that you're a busy lady. So what would you say is the most inventive accessibility feature you've come across?
That's interesting, because I think all of them are, especially, I'd say the normalization of screen readers, even though I know that for the most part that's due to adhering to the CVAA Act and all that, having that in games and things like that. Do you know what, actually, most inventive accessibility feature? Games, I mentioned this in the general chat before, games that allow you to change the settings before you play the game. Any game that does that, I'm a big, I push the idea of being able to customize your experience so that you can play the game. And doing that before you get into the game, that to me is chef's kiss.
I think that's a really good one, because nobody wants to go into a game where and I've mentioned it before as well, nobody wants to go into a game where you get deafened as soon as you open the menu, and you want to be able to change your key binds if you've got them and things like that. So yeah, I think that's definitely an important one. Lud she was typing. I'll leave it a couple minutes. There we go. It's come through. We'll take that one as the last one. So what's the most horrible experience for DHD? What does that stand for?
For ADHD.
ADHD. Yeah, there we go. Sorry. Yep. There we go. Thank you very much, lad. For ADHD in the game. There we go.
For me, it's tutorials that are too complicated and interrupt the flow of gameplay. I don't need you to pop up. much as Elden Ring was accessible for me, the consistent pausing the game to pop up with something, but then occasionally not doing it with another tutorial which disappears off the screen. If I haven't seen it, I'm not going to see it. And if you force me to look at it, I'm not going to look at it. So things like that, tutorials that are made for the people that made the game rather than for the people that are going to play the game.
Yeah, I definitely relate to that one. Too many pop-ups is too much, and then if you pause the game too much, it ruins the flow. It's all sorts of wonky. Yep. So I just want to say a massive thank you to everybody that's come in today, and also can we get a big round of applause for Harriet, please, because she's been fantastic. I will pop the slides into Discord for you at some point as well this afternoon if Harriet's able to do that and send them to me, please.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's been a really informative and kind of just open session, and I love that everybody's come in and been able to talk about their issues, and that it's becoming more of a less stigmatized thing. I think that's one of the words. That disability is not a bad word. Exactly. It's a description. So thank you, everybody. We're just going to round off by, if you can, a few little gifts and a round of applause for Harriet in the general chat. And we will see you all in April for our next session. Okay, there is not one next month, as we are doing GDLX, which is Game Dev London. So if you want to have a look at that, if you pop into our announcement channel in the community area, you can have a look. It is on the 29th of March with Game Dev London. We are partnered with them. So we're going to have a little MLC zone, if you would like to come and join us and meet us. We've also got a budget builder for some game devs if you are interested as well. So thank you very much, and we'll see you all soon, okay? Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys.